everybody. I'm Jeff Finkel, CEO of the Arcview Group, and welcome to our webinar. I think we named this one DEA licenses and the impact of rescheduling. Now, we've had a lot of inquiries about these licenses and the businesses that they enable. And this has been one of the practice areas in our consulting division for a while, so we decided to put this together to educate our audience of entrepreneurs. So Jason and Mark, who I'm going to pass this off to shortly, are going to walk you through an overview of these license types, the business opportunities that each enable, a review of the application process, and an overview of the impact of rescheduling. Now, before I begin, and I always like to do this on our webinars, for our new viewers, let me introduce you to the Arcview Group. So we began life in 2010 as an investor conference producer, producing over 50 investor conferences at which entrepreneurs could meet emerging cannabis companies. Now, in addition to that, we operate a venture fund called the Arcview Collective Fund, and we have a consulting arm that provides a variety of services, such as license applications, which is, one of the subjects for today. And that includes the process, SOPs, operating plans, and all that's required to get a license, business valuations, brand expansion plans, mentoring to social equity license holders, like things like teaching them important skills, how to communicate with investors, and ultimately how to raise money. We also produce a lot of webinars like these. We all want to keep learning, and there's so much to learn as this sector evolves and new states approve commercial cannabis programs. It's sort of ever ending. I think probably, I don't know, Carolyn, you probably know now, some 36,000 to 38,000.
55.
Yeah, I've registered for Arcview webinars since 2020, since we started this. And I imagine by now we've produced somewhere between 85 and 90 webinars on a variety of subjects. So look, please feel free to go to our replay page, www.arcviewgroup. Carolyn, maybe you could put that in the chat, where we have a library of impactful webinars on many topics. You can replay them and you can see what they're all about. And of course, all of these are driven by industry thought leaders. So before I move on to the formal program, let me just take a moment to thank our strategic alliance partners. First, Millennial Strategies, a provider of government relations and advocacy services, certainly very important as our clients are trying to get municipal approval for the cannabis businesses. Cannabis Team for cannabis staffing and executive search. Arcstone Securities and Investments, capital advisory and fundraising services, and our data partner, Hoodie Analytics. We appreciate their support and we appreciate their place in this ecosystem and community. All right, let's get going. Let me introduce you to Jason Malcolm, Managing Principal of Arcview Consulting. Jason will then introduce Mark and begin the program. Jason, take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, Jeff. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jason Malcolm. I am the principal of Arcview Consulting. Arcview Consulting is a fairly new entity under the Arcview Group, about 4 years old. We primarily focus on pre-revenue and post-revenue operations and brands to either help them get started through licensing. So we operate in every recreational and medicinal market, all the way through standing up their facilities and operations, such as retail, through an exit, possibly in a sale. So my primary focus is licensing as well as mergers and acquisitions. I've been working with Mark Crozer, who's on the line today, for a little over a year on DEA licensing, which take a much different shape at the federal level than the state level, which is something we're going to get involved in and speak about today at a deeper level. So Mark Crozer, if you could come on video, I'd like for you to introduce yourself to the group and we get started.
Thanks, Jason. So I'm Mark Crozier, so I'm CEO of Veterans Pharmaceutical. This is my third pharmaceutical company. So I've been in the pharma business since 2017 with cannabinoids, psychedelics, and all that, everywhere from the manufacturing to the import, export, all phases of the licenses. So Prior to that, 40 years law enforcement, retired federal chief of police, and Army retired.
Great, thank you for that. And just to be clear, so you operate all of these licenses today, and you're very familiar with the ins and outs of the licenses, but you're going to go over some of the challenges as well as the avenues of revenue that you could take for each one of these licenses.
Yes, I've had in all series, I've had the first licenses in all series.
Great, great. So let's just dive into what actually a DEA license is and how it differs from the state. So if you could just provide us an overview of what licenses are available to those who will want to apply for one, that would be a fantastic start.
Sure. So there is a bulk manufacturing license. There's a analytical lab R&D license. There's an import license, an export license, and a wholesale license. So those are the main function licenses.
So bulk manufacturing license would be something similar to a grow operation with a state license. So if you were interested in growing cannabis, medical cannabis, for example, you apply for the bulk manufacturing license. Or if you wanted to grow psilocybin mushrooms, you would go for the bulk manufacturing license. And then for the distribution aspect of things, you could distribute across state lines with these licenses, correct?
Correct. You can go international.
So you have three core licenses. You have the bulk manufacturing, the distribution, and the lab analytical. But then you have additional add-on licenses, which you briefly discussed with the import-export and the research and development, I believe, in the lab analytical side. Can you talk about a little bit about both of those add-ons and how they work?
Sure. Well, the analytical lab and the R&D allow you to develop medicines, get FDA approval, and research. It allows you to go after government contracts, grants, and other revenue deals to help develop medicine. And they're about, I think now with the deregulation coming from 1 to 3, the R&D is going to quadruple. It's much harder to do an R&D with a class 1 drug than a class 3. So once it goes to 3, that whole market is really going to open up with the change of rules. So an R&D license will become valuable.
Okay.
For those interested in psychedelics or cannabinoids.
And you're saying that the lab analytical license will allow you to make your own medication. So can you just briefly discuss how that works and what's involved?
Okay, so it allows you to develop it, not make it. You need the bulk manufacturer. So, but let's say you don't have the bulk manufacturer and you have the analytical lab and stuff. Then as long as you use a licensed pharmaceutical GMP FDA approved facility to make the license, to make the medicine, then you can go through the FDA approval, and that facility can then make your medicine for market. But then you need the your wholesale license to be to take it to market.
I see.
Yeah.
So, and you could apply for all 3 license types, is that correct? Are there any caps or any restrictions around one owner or a group of owners owning all 3 with the add-ons of import, export, and research and development?
No, there's no restrictions. It's how basically, to give you an example, like let's say you're in California, you do a California C Corp. So it keeps the people that are involved in the day-to-day business are the ones that are looked at. So DEA isn't looking at your investors or any of that. It's the core people that run the business, and those are things we show you how to set up properly, put the right people in place to get those licenses.
And you won't
who
be
your investor is doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay. And then you won't be operating you got to operate at the federal level. So it's not state monitored or state regulated. It's at the federal level for that regulation aspect of it. So you're not a green business per se. Can you kind of walk through how that's different from the state business and how you're set up from an infrastructure perspective, meaning the pharmaceutical aspect? Thanks.
Okay, well, you're the same as Johnson & Johnson. So you're a regular pharmaceutical company. So you don't have the 288 on your tax deal. Everything's a write-off, legal write-off. So you don't have any of those bars. We aren't, state lines don't mean anything to us. You can operate in any, you can sell and do business with anybody with a DEA license. So an example, on the international set, let's say you have a client in the UK. Well, the UK license is a federal license. So it's like Canada, every other country is what they call a federal license, because they don't have like state licenses back here. So you can do business with those, supply biotechnical ingredients, we call it, or end product to them.
And this is used not direct to consumer, but it's used to distribute to pharmaceutical companies or for universities or research labs that want to do further studies on the schedules 1 through 5.
Correct. Hospitals, clinics, pharmacies, all those things.
Okay.
So anybody with a DEA license.
Got it. And we're kind of going into, you know, the rescheduling benefits later in the conversation, but just to kind of switch gears a little bit to what are some of the revenue opportunities you have with these licenses today? What are you looking at in terms of revenue paths, and what are you chasing after in your day-to-day business?
Yeah, well, in October, we know there's about $100 million in government contracts coming out in cannabis for research to fulfill. So we're going to be bidding those contracts. There's about, in psilocybin alone, probably around $25–30 million in contracts coming out. So that's the advantage of having the analytical license and things. You can bid those contracts to do. And here's the great thing about those. It is doing studies for the government. So it doesn't matter what the end result is. You still get paid for the contracts. So let's say the end result isn't an FDA approved drug or anything. It's data. You're creating data and doing what the government asks you to do with it. Some it's just testing and things like that.
So you basically go onto a government website that you have a government ID that you could click on what opportunities you're interested in and fit your business model, and then you could send a proposal to that link to apply for that contract. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. And what is some of the eligibility criteria that is required for somebody that wants to operate? Do you have to be a pharmacist, for example? Do you have to have a science background? Do you have to be a business owner of some sort? Like, do you have to have, you have to show profitable business from your past experience? What is, if you could walk us through, what does it mean to be a business owner? What are some of the criteria that you have to follow? Or meet?
Sure. Okay, so to get a DEA license, you've got to show you have experience handling controlled substances. We help people with that. So you have to have a pharmacist on staff. It doesn't have to be there, it's just an on-staff position. And then someone with a science background, again, just on staff, doesn't have to be there. Because you have to prove that you have the ability to handle controlled substances correctly, do the 22 forms, the 41 forms. There's forms you have to do, stuff we teach everybody how to do. And it's how you handle drugs and how you ship and receive.
Okay, and if that, in that case, is there any legal or financial prerequisites they need to meet on top of that as well?
Well, you got to be a real company, and you've got to. Here's a lot of things people don't understand. When you do this, first thing we do is make a pharmaceutical company. You got to become a pharmaceutical company. Once we get your pharmaceutical license, called a state wholesale license, then we can apply for a DEA. You put you on the DEA register to handle controlled substances. So you've got to have a minimal staff from day one, a location. So you have to have a minimal staff, and they got to come to work every day. So you go through a period of time, 5–6 months, where people are just looking at each other. But if you're smart, you're developing, we call MOUs. You're finding sources where you're going to source your material from, and then looking for customers that'll buy it once you're licensed with MOUs. So that when you get state pharmaceutical license, we've got to stack MOUs to show DEA that you've got correct sourcing and you have customers. So you have a need. So the government won't give you the license unless you can show there's a need. So we get all, that's part of what we do, is help them get all the MOUs, teach them all this. So when we do the DEA application, it shows a need.
So it works very similar to a state where you do need to have a location during your application process so they could
Right.
validate that you're a real business. And when you say a limited staff, it's just part-time individuals to show that you are ramping yourself up to be that legitimate DEA business that can
Right.
handle all of the inflow of demand once you receive the DEA inspection, as well as your pharmaceutical license that you're going for in whatever state that is relevant to you.
Yes, correct, because DEA will come door knocking just to see if you're a real business, and if they walk in and you don't have any employees, it's over.
Right.
You gotta
Like
show, yeah.
surprise inspections.
Yes, you gotta be there and show that you're actively in the business. You're pursuing an end result.
Understood. Understood. And what exactly does your team do to help an applicant during the process? Obviously, you write the application strategy, but I know you do a lot more than that just to get everybody prepped for when they do go live. So if you could just talk a little bit about some of the services that you provide in this space and how that's valuable to them.
Well, basically, it's turnkey. We tell you, we do all the paperwork, write all your manuals, so that everything's up to date. Tell you exactly what you need to do to be successful, kind of the people you need to have on staff. Make sure you get your website built and tell you how it looks, if it'll pass. The government requires you to have a website. So, and then kind of just tell you kind of what you're going to be in for the ride. And make sure you get company emails set up and all the things to make it legitimate. Then along the way, you'll be getting questions from the state on your pharmaceutical wholesale license, and then from DEA, and all you do is forward those to us. We craft all your answers, send them back, then you send it on your email. So we do all the grunt work.
So you must have, so you obviously you own the licenses, so you know the process inside and out. You know the people that you need to speak with. You know what they're looking for in the application itself. And obviously you operate them, so you know how to sustain the operations moving forward. What have you seen some of the pitfalls and challenges during that waiting period of when you apply for the pharmaceutical license or you apply for the license itself, and then you're just waiting for the DEA to come in and inspect you? What are some of the challenges, some of the pitfalls that you've seen along the way that you could share with us today?
Well, I don't look at them as pitfalls because I understood from the beginning when I did it, the process. So, you're going to spend a half a year, I call banging your head against the wall. But if you're using that time to set up MOUs, develop sources, and actually get ahead of it, so when you get the license, you can start selling the day you get the license. So you take that period of time. Now, some states, the pharmaceutical license is pretty quick. So, you're not out there for 6 months. If you're in California, you're out here 6 months. So depending on the state, how fast that license comes, so we can do the DEA application. And you gotta have a minimal staff, and they gotta be there 9 to 5, because at any time the state or DEA will walk in the office, see if it's real, and if there's no one there, it's like goodbye. I mean, you gotta start over. So they won't issue the license.
Right, makes sense.
Yes.
The DEA is busy, I would imagine, at this point, given the whole rescheduling process. Did you want to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, well, they've had over 7,000 inquiries already.
So it's been a very in-demand, popular type of license to go after. And that's really mainly due to the rescheduling. That's kind of where we wanted to go to next. But any challenges that you've seen and worked with the DEA that you can share with us in this call, in terms of just the inspection process, or anything that will be valuable to some of the listeners in today's webinar?
Well, if everybody listened to us, the inspections go pretty smooth. But you got to listen to us. So you have to, we prep you the day before, so you say what you're supposed to say and don't say what you're not supposed to say. And kind of get you in, and during that, the other thing too is during the few months while you're going through the licensing process, you know, you got to read your manuals. I mean, you actually have to know what we write, because they're going to ask you about them, and because they read them, and you got to be able to answer the questions, or they'll know, like, especially now with the deregulation, it's going to be tough. So they're going to, you know, they have this green policy. So we got to keep the green out of the business. If you're in the state business and you're not going to get a federal license. So we've got to show it as a separate standalone company that's not affiliated with state in any way.
Understood. And that kind of just leads us into the whole rescheduling aspect. So these licenses have been around since what, 2018, 19? They've been
16.
available? 16. Okay. So Congress passed
Only
a bill
been
with
7 issued.
7 issues. So Congress passed a bill saying they're allowing 28 these
26.
licenses, 26 of these licenses to be granted to whoever wants to operate them
Right.
at a public level. So now that and there was a business model before reschedule, right? So you were able to source from DEA bulk manufacturers, or you're able to source from other federally legal countries to supply research or universities for any type of trials they want to go through with any Schedule 1 through 5 drug. But now that the rescheduling has happened, how does that change the whole face of these licenses going forward?
Well, it actually doesn't change. It's still a controlled substance. The only difference between a 1 and a 3 is 1 is considered the highest level, highly addictive. So it takes cannabis from a highly addictive and puts it down equal with a Tylenol 3. Still a controlled substance. So DEA still controls the market. Now, a couple of good things that have happened. So 2 weeks ago, the insurance companies have agreed now that they'll pay for it. So if it's bought at a pharmacy or a clinic, the insurance companies will cover it. And doctors can write prescriptions now when it goes to 3. They weren't allowed to at a 1. So that's why real doctors couldn't really sign on a real prescription pad, like, oh yeah, go do this, because they couldn't do it on a state level.
Right, at the state level, it was all medical cards. It wasn't prescriptions, right?
So the states allowed doctors that went through medical school, but they weren't practicing doctors. They didn't have a DEA number. So yeah, and those guys were the ones writing prescriptions because they weren't really on a prescription pad, a DEA prescription pad. So
post rescheduling, Walgreens, CVS's of the world, the pharmacies that are out there today, you're saying you're going to be sourcing medical cannabis and providing that medical cannabis underneath an insurance provider, if the patient has an insurance provider, and someone could come into your local pharmacy, pick up the medical cannabis, show their insurance card, and then leave with a subsidized cost of the medical cannabis from that pharmacy itself. That's what you're saying.
Right, a little more difficult than that, but that's the theory.
That's the theory.
Everything is going to have to be, here's the other thing, you go federal. FDA is going to have to sign off on the product you're selling. So there's several ways to do that with, one is to develop where you own the IP and the patent. The second is a generic form. And the third is homeopathic. So those are the 3 avenues to approach. Homeopathic is the fastest. Doesn't require all this stuff. But still, you have to submit to DEA all the things for what they call an unauthorized drug. But it still needs a prescription. All this stuff is still going to need a prescription, even on the deregulation. Isn't like you can go, hey, I want to go get a joint. I'm going to go to the pharmacy and get it. And that's still not going to happen. I think that I call that rolled products. I think at some point FDA may allow us in pharmacies to carry that, but everything right now is going to be pill and gel cap or cream form. So because they call it edible or it's consumed. So when you get into medicine, nothing nothing can be on the shelf unless it's FDA approved. Goes through the system. But we know the system. People will get a little say, oh, that costs millions of dollars. There are ways to get things through in generic or homeopathic that we know the easy shortcut. It's not very expensive to do. So we've got 4 medicines right now in Q&A that we'll have on shelves in about 90 days in pharmacies.
So, well, that's fast for the pharmacy. So I was assuming that the pharmacies would be carrying these medications or even the topicals and the edibles that you're talking about sometime in 2025. So you're saying once the rescheduling rules and guidelines are implemented, then the pharmacies could start carrying these medications? Is that the way it's going to work?
Well, no, we can now how we're licensed. I can actually put them there. So this year we've been going through the process of medicine development. So the only thing I can't do yet are what they call OTC, over the counter. Once it goes free, we're going to be able to do some OTC, over the counter stuff approved by the FDA, where they approve the levels of, cannabis or CBD, all those things in it. So we'll be able to do some of those. So our market will, our business will quadruple when they get this done. And it is going to pass and will be implemented before the election.
So I guess what's on everyone's mind is what happens to a lot of the state medical cannabis dispensaries that are out there? How would that impact some of the regulations at the state level if you're going to be offering pretty much a subsidized cost at your local pharmacies for what we're talking about, which is your edibles or your topicals? Do you have a point of view on that?
I think it's going to change the state market drastically, just from my knowledge and being involved in this since 2016. So I think there's going to be anything medical, or states wanting to go medical now won't go because there's a solution. You can go to the pharmacy now. Right. So I think it could reframe how things are done. It's going to be interesting to watch. I know with the FDA, because you look at it this way, you can't even eat a Tootsie Roll that has not been FDA approved. So everybody sidestepped when they did the state deals that everything that you're buying at a dispensary is a consumable, and there's no FDA approval on it. Now with the deregulation down, bringing things down, I think people are going to find more problems with the FDA. Especially anybody making a claim on anything that it does this or does that. I think they're going to find more people where the screws are going to come down a little bit. And that's just me, and there's a lot of opinions on that, but I got in this business because I knew it was going to happen. So, and everything, and Jason, everything I've told you is come down the road.
Pretty much come true.
Yeah, it's come true.
Yeah.
So, I was the federal chief of police. I was involved in stuff at the beginning on how they were going to go and how Congress and Senate were thinking about how this thing was going to roll out eventually. So, but everything I've said since I started in this business, 2017, has come to fruition every which way down. So is it going to change it completely? I don't know. It is going to change it. The state, if you're going to buy for medical use, why don't you go to your pharmacy and let your insurance company pay for it? I mean, it's kind of like, and it's FDA approved, authorized. So
from my experience operating at the state level, when we apply for our clients' state licenses, either for recreational or medical, depending on the state, they could take anywhere between 3 months to some of the newer states, closer to a year. I think in New Jersey, we waited 10 months for our first retail license, and we submitted that the day after the application window opened. It was about a 10-month wait. Now you're saying everything has to be FDA approved. So anytime the big brother steps in and federal government steps in,
right.
I always fear the wait times. So what do you anticipate that wait time being at the federal level? Is it going to be much different than the state? And will they, I guess, do you think they'll become more efficient over time, and that program will evolve so that it benefits some of the operators? I think Mark froze.
Yeah, I think he's frozen.
I think he's frozen.
We can try and call him directly. In the meantime, Jason, do you want to try and answer some of the questions?
I can. Oh, yeah. So Mark did freeze. It looks like. Where
Yeah,
should
he'll
I
be back.
start, Carolyn? Let's see.
What about the one about states license operators expected to do in response to DEA licenses?
Yeah. So I want to start with yeah, so what state license operators expected to do in response to DEA licenses? I think we touched a little bit upon this earlier in the conversation. So we do think it's going to be some level of change going forward with these licenses, especially at the state level, with medical operators. I'm not really sure how the state's going to handle that. I would assume the state should sort of grandfather the medical retailers in as recreational. And they can start selling at the recreational level, I would assume. Otherwise, medical dispensaries will have trouble staying afloat. Out again, assumption because nothing is really live at the moment. But yeah, I'm assuming the state will grant them recreational status and they can sell at a recreational level. But buying flower at a pharmacy doesn't seem like it's going to happen overnight. I think that would take quite some time. As Mark said, it would be topicals and edibles at first.
Mhm. Okay, great. And then there's one question that I believe Mark covered with us a while ago, so you probably have insight to this. How many of these DEA licenses are likely and expected and required to be awarded? And I think Mark just said something about they all have to be awarded before the election. Is
I don't
that
think no, I don't think it have to be awarded before the election. I think what he said was the regulations will be implemented before the election. So the rescheduling itself, the rules and regulations of the rescheduling will be implemented before the election, with a 30 or 60-day comment period on those regulations itself. So you're going to be able to apply for these licenses throughout throughout the life of how many licenses to give out to the public. So I still see that happening, until they kind of close the doors on these licenses at the federal level. If they do, I'm not really sure how that's going to work. It is difficult getting these licenses, not everyone can get them. Some people, get rejected. Most people do. He said 7,000 licenses or applications were submitted. We don't have, I wouldn't say a pulse check on how many will get approved, but from what Mark is telling me, a lot will be rejected and some will get approved. Is there
a specific finite amount though of licenses that they are giving out, or not they are getting out, that they're awarding? I think that there was a specific number.
26, but
Yep.
That's the bulk manufacturing level. For distribution and lab, you don't have those caps. That's my understanding.
Got it.
Is there advantages of DEA licensed companies with 280E taxation being waived for state licensed companies after their product is rescheduled? So with the DEA licensed companies, 280E won't apply. So you set yourself up as a pharmaceutical company. So you don't have to be in a green zone. So in every state, you have to adhere to whatever green zone that state or that municipality gives you. With these licenses, that's not the case. You could set up an office in an industrial municipality or a non-industrial municipality. It's either one. 280 doesn't apply, so a lot of these normal business expenses will be, you can submit them at the end of the year for some level of, relief. So it's not going to operate the same way. And in terms of the states with the 280, a lot of these states have found loopholes around 280 so far, New Jersey being one of them, where I reside. But once the rescheduling hits, 280E potentially goes away, but I'm sure it'll be replaced with something else. The federal government's not going to say no to tax dollars and forgive everyone for it. I'm sure there'll be another tax somewhere.
Okay,
Uh,
great.
And by the way, Mark's internet crashed, so
Excellent.
he's going to be coming back on. Um,
We can go through a couple more and then we can also bring Jeff back on in case he has some additional insights. But we have a number of other questions in the Q&A section. For example, what are some labeling changes you see coming specifically regarding listing ingredients, terpenes, claims of symptomatic treatment? Some of these, of course, Mark will know better, but
Mark, that is a Mark question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mark works with a team of people, specifically a lawyer that does a lot of these interpretation of regulations. So Mark and his team will be more suited for that conversation. And look, and the way this works between Mark, myself, and his team is, if you're interested, just email me and then I'll set up a call with you, get to know you, see
Mhm.
where your interests lie, and then I will brief Mark and we'll set up a call together. And then Mark can really just dive into all the logistics, what it takes, financially to stand up the business, because it is a business at the end of the day. So there is some capital that's required, and we could run through all of those type of expenses leading up to your opening date.
Great. And we could also, if Mark isn't able to reestablish his internet connection, we can have him answer these questions after the fact as well.
Yeah, and please reach out to me with these questions directly, and I could always, be the liaison between you and Mark and getting some of these answers. But obviously, I love to, meet somebody on Zoom or over the phone. It's a little more personal. So if you are, if you're interested, just please ping me. And it looks like Mark is having a lot of trouble getting back on. So he apologizes.
Okay, well, we have all the questions. There's a lot of really great questions and they're probably more specific to Mark. So why don't we take those offline and we could address them with the, when we have the replay, and Mark can address them that way via email. In the meantime, we can have Jeff Finkel from Arcview rejoin you and maybe wrap it up a little early today.
All right, the webinar gods were not in our favor,
No,
It's too hot.
but I certainly want to thank you, Jason, and Mark in absentia for the education. And to Carolyn's point, for those of you who have questions, certainly the ones that you've articulated in the chat and the Q&A, we will get addressed and sent out to the list of registrants that are on today. But if you do have further questions that haven't been addressed yet or asked in the chat group, please reach out to Jason. Carolyn, maybe you could put Jason's email address in the chat and he will be happy to address it. And then again, let me just once again thank our strategic alliance partners who make these webinars possible. So we thank you again for all you do for us, and also you, our viewers, for your time and attention. We, webinars can't be one-sided, so we always want a good audience. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Guillermo on the back end, and Carolyn. Thank you, Carolyn, for jumping in and managing the Q&A and doing what you do. And yes, I was going to ask Guillermo to put up our poll. Please take a minute to go through these questions. This will help inform us to understand things that you'd like to hear from us, and so that we can execute that in going forward webinars. So please fill that out. We're going to actually keep that on for a few minutes after I'm done speaking. Now, this replay will be added to our library of programs on the website. It'll probably be up sometime next week. So look for that. And also please stay tuned for upcoming live and digital programming. And our schedule will be sending that out to everybody. But again, sorry that this got truncated due to technical difficulties, but hopefully you got something good out of this. And again, I think we can bring the answers to your questions that weren't able to be answered today. So I guess that does it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for being with us.